And I can't hide, 'cause growing pains are keeping me up at night.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast do not represent or reflect the official policy or position of the Take a Paycheck Foundation and podcast. All information shared is from personal experiences and does not constitute medical advice. We do not take responsibility for any statements expressed during the podcast. Take a Paycheck does not endorse any products or services. Any said products or services mentioned on this podcast may not be suitable for you or your condition. Please consult with your physician if you have medical questions, as it may pertain to your condition.
Hi everyone, welcome back to this week's episode on Take a Paycheck. I'm so excited to have Dr. Alyssa Kuhn joining me today. Hi Alyssa, can you give me a brief introduction about yourself? Tell me a little bit about your education, your career, your hobbies, and what you've been up to recently.
Yes, so I am a physical therapist and I left corporate healthcare a few years ago. I just started spreading information, bringing to light some of these things that people aren't told, breaking through some of these myths and misconceptions, and really just kind of taking the negativity that's typically around osteoarthritis and spinning it on its head into more of a positive light. So that's been really fun. Like I said, I currently live near Salt Lake City. So my husband and we have a dog. We'd like to go skiing. We have access to so many hiking trails. And so we love being active. We just picked up pickleball, which is amazing. So we really enjoy being active, and I do take my health very seriously. I definitely believe in practicing what you preach. So I have a very heavy emphasis on movement. So yeah, that's pretty much what we've been doing. And now it's just kind of figuring out how we can continue to reach people and spread the hope, spread the optimism, and bring a more positive light to osteoarthritis.
Thanks so much for sharing that. You're so busy, and the way that I kind of even found you on social media was I was scrolling through TikTok and then it came across my feed, and then I started watching your videos, and it was different types of movements that people can do. And I'm like, this is so applicable to not only osteoarthritis, but all rheumatic diseases, all chronic illnesses, and just like people in general that want to move and maybe even dealing with pain. So I was like, I need to reach out to you and
Yes,
get you on the
absolutely.
podcast. Thanks for joining me today. My first question to you is, what experiences kind of led you to have an interest in osteoarthritis patients specifically?
So in home care, not only was I seeing people after total knee and hip replacements, but I was seeing people who were 80, 90, dealing with some deconditioning, some balance impairments, those sorts of things. And so when I initially started this journey, those are the people that I was targeting. I was targeting people that were in that little bit older demographic, getting them to move and showing them that how to build strength and build balance, those sorts of things. And then when I started seeing people in their homes here in Utah, when I started my business, I started just attracting people with osteoarthritis. And then I was kind of blown away, not only just from the things that I heard in home care after hearing people's experiences and what they've gone through, or really what they haven't gone through, or maybe what they missed, what they weren't told. I mean, I was going into these people's homes after having a major surgery, and I was the first physical therapist they'd ever met. And they thought that surgery was the only option. And then after seeing these people in their homes here in Utah, again, it just brought to light those myths. And even just, in the grocery store and things, you hear people saying, getting older is just pain is what you have to deal with. And, it sucks getting older, all of these things. And so then I just kind of made it my mission to start shifting into helping people with osteoarthritis, because I think that there is such a gap, like I mentioned earlier, in the treatment of people with osteoarthritis. I think a lot of times people think it's the end of the world because of what they read, because of what they're told. I mean, there's so many things. You would do a Google search with osteoarthritis and you see, a bunch of people using canes and wheelchairs, and you see swollen hands. And so it paints this very negative picture. And now, since osteoarthritis is being diagnosed younger and younger, as we just learn more about it in the healthcare industry and with more research being done, people are freaking out because they're getting diagnosed maybe in their 30s or 40s and view this arthritis condition as an older person's condition, or, something that happens when you're 50, 60. And so that can bring its own downward spiral when you start literally looking into those internet articles and, all sorts of videos. So it's really understanding that osteoarthritis is not a death sentence to everything you love doing. I mean, even higher impact things like running and just higher impact exercise. It doesn't have to be the end to that. But there's not enough people out there saying that. And there's a lot more people out there making it seem like you have to stop doing absolutely everything. So that's kind of what turned me on to osteoarthritis, because I think that, again, there's that huge gap that really needs filled, because it can really impact the course of treatment, and it can really impact your behaviors, your thoughts, your feelings, just about the future itself. And so if we can bring a positive light to that and make those beliefs, those thoughts turn up in that positive direction, it can really make a huge difference.
Talked a lot about the knowledge gap, but not only the patient perspective, but just in general and like the medical and health community as well. I know you mentioned like examples of like what patients were being told and how they were feeling, but why do you believe this miscommunication is such a big issue? And like, what can other people do as patients to kind of mitigate this knowledge gap?
This is a couple-fold. The first one being, especially coming from a physical therapy background, more of a holistic kind of functional movement background that's kind of portrayed in physical therapy. It allows me to look at things a little bit differently. And I think one of the most common things that is missed. So for example, if you are dealing with knee pain and you go in and see a professional about said knee pain, odds are they are going to look at your knee, see how it moves, ask about any injuries that you had to the knee. They're going to maybe take an image, an X-ray or an MRI of the knee, and then likely make a decision based on that. The problem is that your entire body is connected. So a big thing is looking at the joints above and below. So for example, the way that your ankle moves and how strong it is impacts how your knee moves. The way that your hip moves, how strong it is, how balanced it is, impacts the way your knee moves. So a lot of times it gets people thinking, oh, well, I did have a couple ankle injuries, or, I have injured my hip in the past, or I have been, struggling with the hip. And that's never looked at unless you have like a specific ailment or you're dealing with specific pain in that region. If you can get the joints above and below working, especially if that's one of your big barriers, like for me, I find a lot of people with knee pain have very limited ankle mobility. When you can open up that ankle mobility, you likely will see an alleviation in some of the knee symptoms. It may not be all of them, but it's certainly a step in the right direction. So I think one of the things is looking at kind of that localized approach and advocating for yourself, because I truly believe, and one of my main missions is to educate people. So that way you can advocate for yourself at appointments, and you can also make more informed decisions, surgery, other procedures, that sort of thing. So the more you know, the better you feel making these decisions. And so advocating for yourself, one, for physical therapy, I think that's a great start, because what a physical therapist will do, hopefully, is look at how your body is moving as a whole. Yes, you come in for knee pain, but looking at how you're walking, looking at how you're moving, you can learn about the hip, you can learn about the ankle, you can learn about these other joints based on, a lot of times, just looking at how you move. So hopefully they will address that, because there is some research out there and there are some theories that hip weakness can directly impact knee pain. And so, or contribute to knee pain. And so there's this whole kind of whole body approach. So one thing I would absolutely do is advocate for physical therapy, or asking about, exercise suggestions, trying to get on the train of let's try this first. Another thing is, if you were given, say, treatment options, cortisone injection, medication, surgery, like those are kind of the big three that are typically mentioned. again, it's advocating for yourself. Okay, but I know that there is some research out there pointing to conservative measures. There is some, there are some theories out there that focusing on like exercise and diet and other lifestyle modifications can make a big difference in your pain levels. So do you have any resources where I could try some of those things? Maybe they're connected to a dietitian, or maybe they're have some resources on, exercise or whatever it is. Or sleep is another one. Maybe they're connected to someone that focuses on that. So opening the door to communication of what other resources that they have, I think, is a big part of it. Okay, I know that you recommend surgery, but I'm wondering if there are some other things that I can do before we go down that route. I'm not exactly ready for that. I mean, it's been shown that surgery should not be the first line treatment. It's trying these other areas that you can reduce inflammation. That is more than just this wear and tear theory. And I think those are probably the big ones, just understanding that there are options and opening the line of communication to find those options. And if you're not getting that with a professional that you're with, second opinions, third opinions, trying to find someone who actually understands and aligns with what you're looking for, I think, is a big one too.
I think it's hard for patients sometimes to just have those comfortable conversations with their professionals just because
Sure.
yeah, like they feel scared, they feel intimidated, and then sometimes it feels like, oh, what if they invalidate me and like my experience and what I'm saying? And so I think definitely trying, from what it sounds like, trying to have those conversations, seeing what they can help you with, and then looking for other opinions if needed. Those are really good solutions. I feel like a lot of times we think that, okay, this is the only doctor we can have, but really in reality, it's not.
Sure. And I know it's hard to, go from doctor to, and, try to find all these people, and perhaps maybe being constantly let down or disappointed or not finding the answers that you're looking for. Those people are out there, whether it's also exploring other demographics or specialists so say, if you have a primary care that you're not really vibing with, or they're not really seeing the whole issue, going to a rheumatologist or going to a sports medicine, some trying different specialties, I think, can be helpful. I think this is by no means saying, doctors are bad people or they're trying to purposely steer you in the wrong direction, but they have to know a lot of things about a lot of different conditions. And simply asking about, say, oh, I'm just wondering if there are some other options for treatment, can maybe trigger something that they might not have thought of right away. And so I think it's also the fact of asking about it. You really can't lose, because if you ask about it, then they're like, oh yeah, we can try this, we can try this. Or if they say, nope, surgery is the only way, you say, okay, we're going to go somewhere else. So it's either, you're vibing with the person you're with and they understand and see your values, or you find someone else. If they're not going to see and not willing to see your side of things, then that likely isn't going to probably be the best provider for you. So I think starting out with just saying, okay, what are perhaps maybe some other options? And then if they're still not bringing up like exercise or other lifestyle factors, then that's when you can kind of bring it up, because it's not presented in the fact of like, everything sort of thing. I think it's opening the doors to see what they have to say and how they respond to it. And then you can kind of go off in whichever way you're kind of feeling most confident with.
Yeah, lots of conditions, especially have those factors that come into play, which you mentioned, exercising, and then also
Yes.
stress, sleep, diet, all those things. So, how have you seen these factors come into play with like patients that you see or work with?
Simply, they drive up inflammation. And inflammation is kind of the buzzword that's circling around in kind of all areas of health as they find more out about it. And I think the easiest way to kind of conceptualize this is two people could have pretty similar x-rays. Maybe they're both pretty low on cartilage, their joint space is pretty narrow, which are typical signs of osteoarthritis. One person could have very severe pain. The other person may not even know their joint looks like that, may not even know they have osteoarthritis, any pain, etc. And based on the old wear and tear theory, you would think that both patients would be experiencing pretty similar symptoms if their x-rays and if their joints look fairly similar, which got people thinking, okay, there's something else that's contributing to pain. There's something else that's contributing to irritation, that if two x-rays are exactly the same, but symptoms vary, then there's something outside of the mechanical problems that are going on, which then opens the doors to inflammation. What is causing this irritation? What is causing this increase in pain? And the factors that you mentioned are common ones that can drive up inflammation. And this is always surprising because none of these things are ever really talked about in a traditional appointment or with traditional healthcare. The type of sleep you're getting, the foods you're eating, the stress that you're under, how you deal with that. Is it controlled or uncontrolled? Even just the thoughts and beliefs you have around osteoarthritis can play a huge role in your pain. So again, it's kind of bringing home, and of course, exercise is a part of that. It's bringing home the fact of these things may be contributing to your pain outside of just this wear and tear theory. Because if you think about it, say you were told, your cartilage is gone, your joint space is, again, pretty narrow. That insinuates like nothing can be done. Like, oh, I did the damage. I don't really have any option besides getting a new joint. But a joint replacement doesn't guarantee pain relief either. That if you can address these inflammatory factors, that can be a step in the right direction for preventing surgery altogether or optimizing your recovery afterwards. And I've seen time and time again, people that have incorporated some more anti-inflammatory foods. And people are always wondering, what are the best anti-inflammatory foods? What should I be eating? And honestly, it's starting out with cutting out maybe one or two of the foods that aren't good for you. Maybe it's ice cream, or maybe, something that likely is not the best. And then supplementing it for fruits and vegetables, some of the foods that are healthier. Now, of course, there's some black and white there, but it's figuring out how to start making these small changes in your life, and it can truly make a difference. For example, a lot of people who cut out like processed sugar, so like obviously sweets and those sorts of things, sugary beverages, have seen a large reduction in pain. And it all comes down to consistency as well. Sometimes these improvements don't show up as quickly as you want them to. So it really does take some consistency, which is why making these smaller steps can be really helpful. And they can make a big difference, but you have to be consistent.
I also, now that you mentioned kind of sleep and stuff, it's interesting because I've been to a couple physiotherapists. It just hasn't worked out for me personally. A while back, I tried to go to another physiotherapist because my rheumatologist recommended one. And his approach was very different from like the other physiotherapists that I've seen. He actually like brought a pillow because I was complaining that all of my hand, starting from like my forearm, hurts, and then my wrist. He brought a pillow and he put it on my lap and he told me, okay, now try to type. Pretend you're typing with this pillow. Just the change in my posture would be something that would help reduce. Like he tried to put the pillow behind my back and was like, okay, now like try to type now. Whatever's most comfortable for you, you should try these things. I've never heard of this before. Why is he putting a pillow here? Different strategies on also just how to navigate your day-to-day life in less pain. Even if sometimes you may not feel up to like do some exercises, even though you should, even though I should. He asked me about my sleep patterns too. Why is he asking me that? And I was like, oh, It's okay, it's good. But then I was complaining about how I would wake up in wrist pain in the morning. And he's like, oh, are you sure like that's not because of your sleep? I don't think so. Like, I have no idea. But he's like, it might be that. So try to kind of monitor, like when you wake up in the morning, do you feel like your whole body is sore? Just monitor some of those things, because then that means that something might be happening in your sleep, that you might be waking up in the morning, you might be sleeping on your wrist, lots of different things. And I just didn't take that into consideration. It was a very interesting perspective.
Yeah. And I think that's also two things. The fact of, I think a lot of people, when they have perhaps maybe a negative or maybe a disappointing experience with any professional, whether it's a physical therapist, a primary care, then they just kind of tend to throw it away. Okay, physical therapy didn't work for me. Now I need to try something else. The fact that you're continuing to try to find different people, I think different perspectives are a huge component of finding relief. Because like you mentioned, he tried new things, or he looked at things perhaps in a different light, that instead of simply just giving you wrist exercises, he looked at perhaps maybe what you're doing during the day that could be eliciting that pain. Because you could do all the wrist exercises in the world, but if you're still experiencing pain because the rest of the day you're maybe sitting in maybe a not so optimal posture, or sleeping on it wrong, whatever it is, you're never able to make that progress because you're constantly finding relief from the exercises, but then aggravating it again, finding the relief and then aggravating it again. So you're kind of just left at this kind of stagnant spot. So finding different perspectives, and it just can offer so many new opportunities or new ways of looking at things to then click with you to say, okay, that might be why. And then you start to elicit results.
I mean, I am someone who, after a couple of physiotherapists, I was like, no, thank you. I don't want to go back ever again. It's so time consuming. I have so
Yeah.
many better things I can do in my life. But then after a while, I went back to the doctor and she's like, I really, really think you should go and give it a try again because the one that she recommends is different than the one that I saw. Okay, you know what? Sure. I might as well. I don't think
Yeah.
it'll hurt me. Yes, it might take 1 hour of my time, but if that's gonna help figure out strategies on how won't be in that much pain, I feel like it's worth it in my mind.
Yeah, and now there are also other opportunities through online programs and different things that you can. I mean, not all social media is great, but there are some certainly helpful options, especially like on YouTube and things. So there are other options besides, doing the one-on-one care. I think what's important for one-on-one care is also like if you're in this space of you're pretty limited on time, maybe the office is quite a ways away, finding ways to kind of set up with a physical therapist. Okay, if I'm not going to be able to be here for the next month, or I'm only going to be able to be here once a month, are there certain things I can be working on at home? How can I progress this, to see if also that's an option to help with your adherence, or if there's any videos they recommend online or on YouTube, different ways that you can find strategies that will last in the long term instead of going twice a week. Because there are options where you can kind of set people up for success based upon what they need and, the time and all of those constraints.
It seems pretty individualized, and I think not a lot of us know how personalized it could be to what we want. It's nice to hear some of those other options. I kind of wanted to ask because I find that lots of patients are concerned about safety when it comes to exercises just because we're like, oh, we don't want to hurt our joints even further, things like that.
Sure.
So how can patients actually like strengthen their muscles or exercise in a safe manner?
This one can be tough. I think when it comes to like YouTube and social media and things, there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of different movements. There's a lot of things that I know that a lot of people tend to like overdo things, or they try an exercise they saw and it just did not make them feel very good. I think probably one of the factors to think about is movement should make you feel better, not worse. And the hard part is sometimes people are like, well, I try something and I feel okay, and then afterwards I deal with pain. So if you're experiencing pain during the movement, don't think of it as I need to push through this because this person said that, it's going to relieve my knee pain in 30 seconds if I do this. Listening to your body, I think, is one of the key factors in reducing that pain, reducing that risk of injury, because pain is ultimately a way your body communicates with you. Now, when you're one of those people that maybe has pain after doing something, I think one of the things to look at is, okay, what did maybe what about that activity was difficult? I know that one's not always easy, but I think learning from this can be something positive. So for example, if you were trying like a step up on your stairs at home, typical stairs are about 8 inches high. You were trying a step up and perhaps maybe you experience pain afterwards. You could try on a lower step. You could try different ways to modify this exercise, or maybe hang on to the railing next time you try, or find different ways to modify it to make it a little bit easier to see then how your body responds. It's ultimately kind of a trial and error situation if you experience pain afterwards, like if you don't experience pain right away. I think it's also worth looking into someone who has a background in physical therapy, a specific condition like rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis, because I think that there is a definite approach. Like for me, with osteoarthritis, over the course of the years, I've realized, certain movements that are going to probably flare someone up that has hip osteoarthritis, or certain movements that are going to flare somebody up if they have knee osteoarthritis, certain movements that will be helpful if you have ankle osteoarthritis. So you start to learn and see some patterns. Now, of course, people are going to be different, but I know that with a person that's not really super familiar with exercise, maybe they've taken a few years off and they have knee osteoarthritis, I know relatively what to start them out at, and then progressing on from there, and how to progress in ways that aren't going to flare up pain in most people, because again, everybody's going to be a little bit different, but giving different modifications. So I think it's important to also look kind of at the maybe credentials or the experience, or, looking at maybe what the professional or the person that's doing the social media posts, that's doing the YouTube videos, and just kind of look into their background and see perhaps what maybe they specialize in. That's not always saying that just because somebody has, a ton of certifications or specializations that it's going to be perfect either. But I think in digging in and doing some research, I have a lot of people who, like, if I have a workout video or something, they will watch it first, so they know what's coming and maybe if it's going to be too hard or what they think. So I think being skeptical is important, but I also think finding experts in certain areas, people like physical therapists, to try to kind of minimize your risk for injury and things. But again, it can't always be 100% prevented when you're online.
Sounds like you really just need to do your own research and kind of make your best judgment, and then also just talk to others. I think when you're part of an arthritis community, which may not be for everyone, or they may not have found it, we find that there are lots of people that we already know, that their resources are credible and things like that. Reaching out to people that already have kind of done their research. Obviously, it's not going to be the same for everyone in terms of what works for you, but I find that just getting that mentorship or guidance in some way, and like putting someone in the right direction of like where they can find some of these resources, is super helpful. So anyways, I will be linking all of your content down below as well, just so people can check it out. But thanks for sharing that. I wanted to just kind of talk about what people can actually expect when they go to a physiotherapist appointment, because I think it's not really talked about often. Like, we sign up for physio, but we don't know what that means. And so can you give me a little bit of background of like, what do people expect? How long are the sessions? How are they like catered to people? And what do like patients get out of this the most?
First, important to note that just like doctors and, rheumatologists, that even some physical therapists have specializations. So say, for example, you're dealing with wrist, forearm pain. There are physical therapists who and even occupational therapists who specialize in hand therapy, wrist therapy, like specialize in those, particularly like the elbow. But there are people who do specialize in those specific areas. There are also people who specialize in like pelvic floor physical therapy, which is a big up and coming kind of specialization. There are people who specialize in more like sports type areas. If you're like a more active person who's looking to get back to a certain sport, or so it's important to look at perhaps what you're looking to get out of it, to see if there's a specialist that is like for you. You could say, well, do you know any like hand therapists? Or, if that's your primary concern, that maybe I could try, because maybe they will have a different perspective, or they have more of a specialized view on things that could ask you questions that maybe you didn't think to ask or think to explore. So I think first is looking at that. There are a lot of physical therapists who are specializing in different areas. There are people who like specialize in Pilates. There are people who specialize in like all kinds of different things. So looking at kind of those options in your area, if you're looking for something one-on-one. Now, if you're in more of like a rural area, there are a lot of physical therapists doing telehealth consultations, which can be just as helpful as in person. It doesn't always have to be in person. So if you are one of those people that don't necessarily have a lot of options around you, looking to find someone who is offering like a wellness session online can be very helpful as well. When you go into, say, an appointment, usually it consists of an evaluation, which essentially is looking at different ways in how you move. So say if you came to me with you're experiencing knee pain, we look at how you walk, what maybe activities are painful for you, what activities feel good, how you usually alleviate pain, what typically works for you, looking at some of the things probably more on a global scale of like sleep, and just maybe having a brief discussion about, food, if you're following a specific diet or anything like that. Some people don't necessarily go into more of that global view. But it's really just kind of finding out maybe where those muscle imbalances are, those asymmetries, like, oh, my right side's actually a lot stronger than my left side, or pointing those out. Oh, my balance is terrible on my right side, but it's pretty good on my left side. So finding those imbalances can lead you to pointing out where you need to focus on. So usually it's about the first session probably is this evaluation, just getting to know you, getting to know your body, how it moves, and finding potentially some starting points for treatment. And then the frequency is a lot of times the default's like twice a week. There is some flexibility there. Like I said, if it was you saying, okay, are there any other options? Like maybe could I come once a week and then you could give me some things, or once a month? So there is some flexibility there depending on the clinic you go to. There are also a lot of people moving more towards like cash pay providers, which are much more flexible, because a lot of physical therapists are held down by insurance, and their treatment and their frequency is dictated by insurance. So moving to a cash pay option, if that is a viable option for you, usually you will have a little bit more of a specialized physical therapist in a certain area. They're able to spend more time with you, able to give you kind of a more flexible and a more personalized approach. There are also tons of people who do cash pay wellness sessions. So I think the big thing is, just because you go to one physical therapist and it doesn't work, or it's not the experience you were looking for, there are so many other options for treatment. Like I mentioned, a telehealth session or a virtual session. Like for you, if you're like, oh, driving there, I skip it all the time, or maybe I cancel and I just have a hard time, I dread going there, then maybe some sort of a virtual option may be better for you. So you're in a better mindset, So I want you just to know that there are options, but typically, you have your evaluation, and then you have the subsequent sessions working on those things. One thing that I see unfortunately happening a lot, when you go to a physical therapy session, it should not be running through the exercises you're doing at home. If that is happening, find somebody else. There are so many people who I meet who say, I go into physical therapy, but all we do is go over the exercises I do at home, and I can just do that at home. They should be progressing you every session, or regressing, dealing with some maybe symptoms that popped up. It's not always an upward trajectory, but it should be changing each session, because that's how you progress. So I think that's also important to, if somebody is doing the same things over and over and over again, first open the dialogue to say, hey, do you think maybe we could try something else? These are feeling really easy, or I can totally, do these at home. Are there certain things I should work on here? Opening that dialogue first and see the response. And they can be like, oh yeah, I thought those movements were pretty hard for you. We can certainly change it up. And then if it's just not there, then finding somebody else.
That makes sense. And I think it's hard to make that judgment of when it is time to find someone else.
Like a lot of times, maybe when you have increased pain or you have a flare up, it takes people back to like square one. Like, oh, I've made all this progress and now I've completely regressed. Or, just because I'm dealing with this pain, it means that I've done something wrong. But it's a learning curve of certainly some pain may be spontaneous and, out of your control. But for a large part, it's looking at, okay, what did I change, and figuring out what you can learn from it. Same thing if you have a negative experience with a professional or a physical therapist or a doctor or whatever it is, learning from that so you know what to look for and perhaps can prevent it in the future, I think is important.
I wanted to talk about your initiatives and what you've started off. At the beginning of the episode, we were talking about Keep the Adventure Alive and the YouTube channel that you have and social media, but I just wanted to dive a little bit further into that. Can you talk about the specific content that you provide to patients?
A big part of the social media, the content, the YouTube videos is one, showing people what's possible. Understanding that there are things you can do, that it doesn't have to be, a death sentence to the things that you love. You don't have to stop hiking, or you don't have to stop doing these things, or you can get it back if you've already stopped doing those things. I think another big one is getting simple, small wins. I think a lot of times, especially because, my content is primarily movement driven because that's the background that I'm in. Understanding that something doesn't have to feel overly challenging to be effective. And I think it's perhaps maybe a little bit more eye-opening in a younger demographic that, you're used to, maybe you played sports or maybe you just had a background in exercise. You're used to things feeling challenging. Maybe you feel sore. Maybe you feel, you're dripping in sweat after something. Like that's a workout. And that's kind of the background that I came from. But now it's shifting that to no, simply just moving in ways that your body is giving you. For example, if you have, again, let's just say knee osteoarthritis, simply just kicking your legs out when you're sitting at a desk or when you're, listening to a podcast can be effective. It doesn't have to be this like 60-minute long workout, or simply, stepping sideways or stepping backwards. That's kind of one of the big initiatives that I've started, is adding in more variety to your movement. So simply stepping side. So like if you're walking a dog and they stop and sniff something, taking a few steps sideways or walking backwards down your hallway, adding in different variety can be extremely beneficial. It doesn't always have to be these super challenging movements, especially if you're dealing with a chronic condition, whether it's any type of arthritis, or maybe you're not feeling great that day or not feeling super energized, whatever it is. Doing simple movements is better than nothing. And so a lot of times I show very simple things. It's not always, high level things, because you have to build up to that. And if I can get people to that maybe dread movement, fear movement, anticipate pain with movement, if I can get them to start moving in ways that their body likes and doesn't hurt, then that's an astounding win. Because what it does is build confidence to say, wow, maybe I can actually move without pain. Maybe I can actually get better at these things. And so that's a big part of what I try to do via social media, is show a lot of simple things. And I think that's a big part of it is, wow, like I can actually do these in, a couple of minutes throughout the day. I can actually get this done, or while my coffee's being made. Making it seem attainable is important. And also showing things that, again, those simple movements, it doesn't have to be complicated, can be effective. movement is a big barrier for a lot of people, whether it was a negative experience or they're just in a high level of pain, or just they've had they've tried things and it didn't work, or, it just led to frustration. And so it's overcoming that barrier, because movement is one of the most powerful treatments, and not only just for chronic conditions like arthritis and things, rheumatic conditions, but just in daily life. I mean, there's so many benefits to exercise. It's just kind of meeting you where you're at.
So I'd love to end off the podcast episode with an advice segment. I feel like you've already given so much advice to the questions that I want to ask you. You probably have more to say, but what advice would you give to people who are skeptical of going to a physiotherapist or an occupational therapist?
There's really nothing to lose. I mean, like I mentioned in the beginning, okay, so you go to this person, maybe they offer different perspectives. Maybe they get you thinking about things in a little bit of a different way, like you had mentioned in your experience. Or maybe they're terrible. Maybe you just don't vibe with them. They're just not listening. So you don't go back. And it's just, again, learning from that experience. I think everyone should at least try it and see how it feels. Like I said, it can also look a lot of different ways. Physical therapy itself is really kind of expanding in its way of delivering care. You can go to like a traditional physical therapist in kind of like a corporation or something, or you can find other avenues. There are certainly people, and I think social media has kind of helped bring this to light, certain people that, again, focus on certain areas. So I think one, you really have nothing to lose. Maybe some money if you have to pay for, a session. But I think when it comes to your health, obviously, a lot of times it's an investment. You get what you put in, and being able to advocate for yourself, opening up different discussions, the more you know about a condition, the more you know about perhaps maybe treatments or just simply questions that you should ask, can be really helpful as well to help you feel more confident in the session. So I think it's 100% worth a try. Like I said, if it goes terribly, there are other options. There are other physical therapists. And it's just, again, taking the time to kind of find the one for you. But I also think on the other part of this is physical therapy isn't going to work unless you do. And I think, again, it's coming down to what you will actually do. If they tell you to, I don't know, bike 10 minutes at home, or they tell you to, walk 20 minutes a day, but you're not going to do that, then asking for other options, because again, you also have to put in the work to see the results. So it's just being open and honest about that. Because there are a zillion ways to do things. So it's figuring out what is best for you, or what you think will work best for you. And if it doesn't end up being the case, then you just adapt and you make a change.
Thank you so much, Alyssa, for joining me on today's episode on Take a Pain Check. We had a great conversation talking about what started off your career in terms of osteoarthritis and how it kind of sparked your journey on creating your organization and your account. You dived into the knowledge gap with the research and patient care when it comes to osteoarthritis, and specifically how miscommunications have led to a lot of challenges. You discussed the importance of having a holistic approach, and then also like considering different factors when it comes to healthcare and like just taking care of yourself, such as diet, sleep, exercise. We talked about what people can expect from physiotherapists and what a patient can do to really get the most out of this experience. And finally, we end off the podcast episode with kind of talking about the content that you create, and some advice. So everyone, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, check out Alyssa's YouTube channel and social medias, which I will link down below. And I'll see everyone in 2 weeks on Take a Pain Check. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
And I can't hide, 'cause growing pains are keeping me